Okay, hi everyone. Welcome to this new Hangout, React Europe Hangout. Today we have the pleasure to have with us Roy Derks, who will talk about React, TypeScript, and GraphQL. How are you doing, Roy?
Hi, yeah, I'm doing great.
So I will let you share your screen and then you can start your presentation.
Yeah, sure. Hi, also, I'm Roy, and I'm going to talk to you a bit about how you can use React and TypeScript and GraphQL together. Let me share. Yeah, so the main starting point for this will be starting.
Your screen is in reverse.
Let me check.
Yeah.
Is this better?
Yep.
Great.
Perfect.
Yeah, so the main starting point for this will actually be like a GraphQL server. So I've built a small GraphQL server that's running on Code Sandbox, which I'll share the links and stuff with you later on, which you can see over here. So it's just a small code sandbox. It's just one query, and I'm going to get some products information. So I've made a simple query. I'm going to get products information. I'm going to get an ID, a title, some offers, and it just returned me this JSON blob. And next to this, I've created a small Create React app. See where it is? Oh, it's over here. So nothing too fancy. It's just like your typical Create React app, and I'm using TypeScript with it. So that's one of the changes I did to just the default Create React app. So as you can see, I'm using React scripts and with TypeScript, and I've created a small app, and it all starts in here. So as I'm using GraphQL, I'm going to import Apollo client and Apollo provider. So this is actually the old way of using Apollo because they've changed tons of stuff, and they actually have, I believe it's version 3 from Apollo client, and it's going to let you get rid of a lot of stuff you don't actually need. So you don't need to use Apollo Boost in the future, and React Apollo, I believe it's integrated in Apollo client if you're using the hooks. If you're using components, then you would still have to import your components separately. But it's interesting to look if you're working on some project now. And as you can see, I'm using Apollo Client with my GraphQL server. So this server is just the one that I showed you over here. So this is the same one. And I'm just rendering one component, which is my products component. And for this, I'm using all TypeScript. So you can see it's not a JSX file, but it's a TSX file. So it's not regular JSX, but it's going to add some typings on top of it. And in here, I've created a lot of types or interfaces actually to have my code working. So this query over here, it's almost the same query as I was using over here. So we'll check it. If it's the same one. Yeah, it's almost the same one. I've added some extra information, but this query is exactly the query as you can find over here. And as I'm looping over this, you can see I've added a lot of typings to my code because otherwise it'll run, but I haven't add typings to everything, but most of the stuff is typed in here. As you can see data, it's gonna all resolved. And it will all relate to this gets product type that's coming from here. So basically I had to hard code type all my typings for this query. And this is the query that you just saw. And over here, I'm just loading some things, and then I have it running right here. So let me go to the React app. As you can see, I'm not a designer, so I kept it really simple. The main things I'm doing, I'm just iterating over my data. And my data is just the same data as you saw over here. So it's titles, it has some offers with prices, and that's about what you can find here. So you could think of this as a listing website or a marketplace or something quite similar to like all the marketplaces you know. So we've got one blue t-shirt and we've got multiple companies selling it. So those are the offers, they all have different prices, and that's something I wanted to display over here. So in this playground and both on this app, you can see the information about these t-shirts and their offers and their pricings. And on the other side is this app running the code. And as you can see, I've added a lot of code typings, which we already saw. So if I would delete those typings, I'm not actually using TypeScript anymore. I'm just using JSX, and I've added a TypeScript extension to it. So my main difficulty is when you're using just Apollo without TypeScript, that you don't really know what your types are. So you have to make things like this. So you're not really sure there's a title, right? Because title, maybe it's undefined. From here, because it's typed, I know title is actually a string. And my offers, it will actually be a type of offer because I've typed all these things in here, right? So you can see my product type. I've defined here what my product looks like, right? So it's ID, it's titles, offers. But what would actually happen if I would change title? So maybe I rename title to something else. Maybe I don't want title to be title anymore. Or maybe add something to my server and I don't want reseller, which is actually what's being displayed right over here. Maybe I don't want reseller to be reseller. Maybe I want to change it to reseller name. So this would immediately break my typings over here, right? Because I'm not actually having a typed reseller anymore. I'm having a reseller name, which is probably new, so it would be undefined. Maybe it can be null, maybe it can whatever. So when you're using TypeScript with GraphQL and React, you're going to find yourself writing a lot of types that you don't actually need to write all the time. So there's actually one way to solve this because you already got your server, right? So this GraphQL server that I've got running out here, it has a schema, and my schema actually is typed because I know I've got a product, I've got an ID, I've got a title, a string, which is thumbnails, other offers, I've got relationships with other types. So actually this type of information is something I also want to be using inside my code without having to rewrite it or having to duplicate it. As you can see here, I've deprecated the field thumbnail name. So if I would change thumbnail to thumbnail name, so I've changed thumbnail name to thumbnail. So this is actually deprecated. So everyone that's using this GraphQL server, it should have to change thumbnail for thumbnail name. So the other way around actually, but you know where I'm getting. So if you would look at your types right here, so I've defined get products, which actually is the return of my query, and I've defined it to have a product, and product to have a title, a string, an ID, offer, some other typings, and all those types are listed in here. So every time I make an update to my schema, I have to update my typings over here. But what I was trying to get at, like these types that you can see over here, like interface, product, ID, title, string, they're quite similar to this one, right? So if I would copy paste this, I'm not sure if it would work actually. Let's try. Yeah, so we've got two kinds of types here, right? So we've got product, which we're using in TypeScript, and we've got a type product from our schema. And as you can see, ID is an integer here. That will definitely break. So I made my types wrong after all. So it should have been a number. So this code will probably already break. So we've got ID, which is an integer. You can see they're both required because I'm not having any question mark over here. I've got a title, which is a string. Looks quite similar. I've got offers. It's actually a listing of offers. And you can see here it's a list as well, an array. So this already feels very duplicate because I'm rewriting this logic every single time I'm changing something in my schema. So it should be possible, right, to get your types just from your GraphQL schema to actually have them working inside your TypeScript code. So that's where a really cool package came along, which I recently met the guy that's been working on this package with his team. Yuri, he's a great guy, and he told me a bit more about actually what's in place behind this company and how they're trying to use GraphQL, which is a really great way of approaching, especially handling data flows together with your components and applications. So they've created a package, and it's actually in my package.json. It's GraphQL CodeGen. And if you try to install this, you're probably going to have to install the CLI, and it's going to ask you what kinds of stuff you want to install. Is it like TypeScript only? Is it TypeScript operations? Maybe you also want to work with React Apollo, which I'm going to show you later on. So I've installed all these things. It's all started with the CLI. And now you can see it's just in the dev dependency. So when I'm building my code, I won't actually need these packages anymore because, and I'm going to show you later on, it's going to generate TypeScript types for you and also TypeScript components. So not actually TypeScript components, but more like React Apollo components as we've defined them over here. So we're going to use this package to do a lot of work for us because we don't want to have to write typings for product or offer every single time we're going to add a new query to add a new query like here, or maybe create a new component. Every time you change something, you don't want to create your typings all over again because it's definitely going to fail at one place and you're going to runtime errors, and probably avoiding runtime errors is why you install TypeScript in the first place, right? So we're going to use Graphical Code Generator to generate those typings for us. So in here you can see it's just a small setup. So again, my schema comes from a GraphQL server. and that's the GraphQL server we already saw. So not only if I've defined a GraphQL server for Apollo client, I also defined a GraphQL server to be used by GraphQL code generator. So they will both be using the same server. And that's how I'm definitely sure that everything that's defined in my schema will end up being typed, so I can use it in the end. So we're going to use the package to use this types and make TypeScript types out of it that can be used in our React application. So if we go back to the YAML file, that's actually at the very core of this one, you're going to see we've got some things designed over here. So you're going to want to be overriding all generated code because maybe you make new iterations over it. We've defined where our schema comes from, and this is just this GraphQL server. And then we've defined a place where we store our documents. So something you might not be doing in your code already because maybe not everyone is using .graphql files. Maybe you're using build schema files, or maybe using just GQL and you're just using template literals to create queries. The most easiest way to do this with GraphQL code generator is using .graphql files. So you might need to add something new to your Webpack or to whatever sort of compiler you're running, because GraphQL Create React knows how to work with it. But maybe you ejected it, maybe you've got your own setup with Webpack or Rollup, then you might need to install some extra dependencies actually to get .graphql files working. But to be going back, so we've defined documents, and the documents are defined here. And this query that I've defined over here, the get products query, it might look familiar to you, right? Because we've tested it over here. You can get information. And we've also been seeing this query in our component, right? So this is also the same one that we used before. So we can use this, just put it in here. It's going to be the same query. So that's something to be knowing on beforehand as well, right? Because we want to make typings for this query and whatever fields from our schema it's using. So inside this YAML file, I've defined my schema, my documents, and then I'm going to define what it will be generating. So I've defined that it's going to generate files in my source/generated map. So this is one map. I'm going to put it away and I'm never going to touch it. So if you've got a new developer in your team and he's been trying to make changes to the generated files, and probably he doesn't know what it is for. So it's important to understand the generated files. You shouldn't never touch them because they're generated. So every time we're running this code, it will override it. So in here to do multiple things. It's going to use TypeScript, TypeScript operations, and TypeScript React Apollo to create components for me. But it's going to start and just get React Apollo out of there, because maybe we just want to start with TypeScript operations. We just want to see what the typings look like, right? And it's going to look at our schema by using introspection. As you can see over here, it introspects my schema. So this is actually what my schema would look like if you would change it into a big JSON file. So if we're using this YAML file, Graphical code generator will automatically know that you want to use these configurations to generate TypeScript out of your schema. So let's get back to our package.json file. So you see we've added all these packages to our dev dependencies. And then I've added a new script. So actually when I run npm run generate or maybe yarn generate, I want to run GraphQL code generator with my configuration file. And I believe this is already the configuration file by default. We just put it in there just to be sure. So you never know, you don't automatically delete it. That's something I actually been doing with YAML files. If you don't put a configuration somewhere and you're going to search for this one and you're going to look into your entire screen, you wouldn't have it defined like in your package.json, you probably wouldn't know what the code would be for. So always put something in here just to be sure that you're never going to delete some files that you're not supposed to be deleting. So in our products.tsx file, we haven't changed anything quite similar, right? Because this application is... I did change something, so it's not running. Change it back. There it is again. And so we want to create types because those types are hard-coded. So I'm going to run the graphical code generator. So you can use npm run and then generate, and it will do the generation for you, or you can just use yarn. I typically just use npm. I'm not sure why, but actually I prefer it that way. So I'm going to run npm run generate. It's going to get my configuration. It's going to try and do some stuff, and then I've got an error. I've put something in there that shouldn't be there. So let me see. I've been changing this after all. Go back to how it used to be. Generator again. So that's something you can automatically see because somehow a field that didn't belong in here ended up here. So probably I thought reseller name was something. So I would change this back to reseller name. It's going to throw the same error because it will see that a reseller name isn't available. So did you mean reseller? So this is something you already know. If you've put documents in your code base with fields that don't exist, you're going to get errors. Always be sure to run this generator. It's just a CLI to help you build more reliable code with GraphQL and TypeScript. So now it's done all the configuration, it's parsed it, it's generated outputs. So let's see what that output looks like. So we've got this file, and in here we've defined the default scalars. So these are just a mapping of the basic scalars in GraphQL, like ID, string, boolean, int, to what they would look like in TypeScript. So ID usually is a string of course is a string, boolean is boolean, and integer and floats, they're both numbers in TypeScript. And then we upload Scalar type. We can just leave it out for now. It can make it a bit confusing. So what it's been doing, it's been creating typings. So as you can see here, we've got export type product. You can see it's an ID. It's got a Scalar type, is an integer in GraphQL, but it's actually being mapped to a number in TypeScript, right? Because you want to know the TypeScript type from your schema. So these types are all stuff we can import. So you can see import type product here. So let's head over here, right? So basically we could be going on and deleting this one. So we get errors, right? Because VS Code doesn't know where product can be found. So let's tell VS Code where it actually can find product. So it can import it from generated GraphQL. And you can see piece is restored. It's going to know product is product. And over here, it's going to throw an error because somehow doesn't know. It still thinks this is a number. So it's going to take you a lot of hustle because this one product is automatically generated, but offer still isn't, right? But if you go over here, my code is still running perfectly. So that's good. So let's get offer out of here as well. So if you don't want to be using that offer type, just get an offer type that's being defined in our generated file. And now you can see VS Code will it will remember and it will see that the product type is going to be generated, the offer type will be generated. And the only thing we are hard-coded is this one right here. And I guess we'll be looking for this field in our generated file. Probably we can find something quite similar to it. So maybe it's the gets products query. We can try and import that one. It's going to tell where it's going to get it from. We're going to get some errors. Probably it already knows. Yes, it already knows. The only thing we're having is one problem, right? So we automatically create typing so we can delete all those typings over here. So you saw what I did, right? So I've been deleting a lot of typings that we haven't been using before. And then in the end, I've told my query component that it can just use the get products query defined by generated. So we don't have to define them like here, right? Because TypeScript is a bit smarter than some people might guess. So it will already know to inheritance that it will get the get products query from here, and we don't need it anymore over here. So as you can see, I've been deleting a lot of types, and ID still isn't fine. So let's find out. Can delete these ones as well. So we just need one typing, and it's going to completely fill this one with types. And the only thing we need to be solving is ID, because it shouldn't be in there, right? So we've got a problem right over here. Property ID does not exist. And it's probably because we've forgotten to put our ID somewhere. So if we head over to our document used for creating the typings, you can see offers, it lacks an ID. So the error we're getting over here, offers needs an ID, somewhere defined over here. It doesn't know that offer could have an ID. So we can be adding it right here. And then we can run a generator again. So first make sure our error is there, and then try and run the generator again. So in here, it's generated new files for us, and you can automatically see VS Code knows ID could be a number right now. So this is actually quite clever. It goes very fast and very automatically. We've created new typings based on our query. So the typings that we've created before, they lacked a lot of fields, and now we automatically generate them using this. And we can use the same sort of appliance if you're using GraphQL hooks, right? So if you're using React Apollo hooks, maybe just go for a use query hook. Probably get rid of this here. Maybe try and export something else. So let's get rid of this one. I'll do a default export again. It looks something like this. And we should also go for a function component, right? Because we're going to use hooks in here. Turn off something so React doesn't break. And then we're going to use a use query. So usually I always tend to forget what my return field would look like. So let's just put it like this. Get returned is use query. Find it over here. And we're going to feed it our products query, right? Just see what that return field looks like. Here we can probably see what it would looks like. So we've got undefined data. Strange. So we've got a products array. So actually it's going to return data field. So the data field is something I've been looking for. So in here you can see data is declared, but it's never read. So we're going to have to be using that field right here. So probably we can just go ahead and get loading from there as well. And then we're going to return some stuff. It's probably like this one. Let's keep it the same for simplicity. Complete a return one. Also return something if we're still loading, because it take a while, especially if your internet connection is slow. And get rid of this return. So let's polish this code a bit. Format to document. And now we're getting errors, right? Because we don't have any typing. So binding element typing. So in this scenario, because we're going to use query hook, there are multiple ways to create typings for this. So we can automatically add a type to use query, or we can just, if you might remember, we're going to use the product type again. That's being generated automatically for us. So in product, and already we know to inference what those fields look like, right? So you can see code generator. It both works for you when you're using GraphQL components with React Apollo, which we saw over here. It also work with hooks. So we were having a use query hook over here. It's going to get a products query and it's going to return data. So this is all quite nice, right? But there was a small catch that I didn't show you, something that can be quite useful. So let's get rid of this one because we're... So let's get back to the React Apollo components that we saw before. So we'll be closing this one. VS Code is not really my friend today. Yeah, so we probably won't be closing this one. So just get rid of it to the bottom of the screen. The thing that I didn't show you just yet is we've created a query. We're using just React Apollo query components right now, and we need to add the typings ourselves. But as you might saw in our code generator file, there are more ways to actually get the typings in there. So you can see TypeScript React Apollo. Let's turn this bit off. So let's look at our generated file. We just created typings, right? So we've got types for all the types in my schema, but we don't have any components in here. So another trick code generator can do is creating components for you. So I've actually commented out this one, and I'm going to comment it back in. So we're going to be using TypeScript React Apollo to create automatically components for us with code generator. So in here, we're going to run the command to generate again. So npm run generate, or maybe yarn if you're a fan of yarn. I'm just going to run this one. It's going to take us a while. It's parsed configuration. It's generated outputs. So if we now go back to a generated file, it actually created new stuff in here. So it doesn't only create a good products query and all the typings that we saw before, it's also add new stuff. So it's going to export the document. So it's GQL, so you can use it. It also returns component props and get products component actually. So if you look at here, it automatically used all the typings in here from the query, the variables, and the props, it used it to create Apollo React components for us. And as you can see over here, we're using Apollo because it's already in there, right? So just get rid of it. And also my get products query. Now let me do this differently. So let's try and replace this part with the get products component that has been generated by React Apollo. So let's see what it looks like. So VS Code already knows it's a title because this component is typed very well. So you will know ID, it's a number, title actually will be a string, or offers are typed as well. And all the fields in offers are also typed. So ID is a number, price will be a string, reseller, it will be a string as well. So we get all these typings, and what we've deleted actually are these things. So we're going back to this right here. So this whole bit, we could actually delete this whole bit, right? Because we're not using these fields anymore. Our code is still working. That's something that's nice to see as well. And so I can delete the typings from here. I don't need the typings anymore. I don't need typings for product anymore. The only thing I'm using is this one, the get products component from the generated file. And you saw I already could delete my React Apollo uh, import right here because I'm not using query or use query anymore. And something else I can delete is actually my query itself. So I've defined the query over here. And I also had defined the query in my documents file. And so I actually defined my query twice. So one way or another, it would have lead to errors somewhere. So we could get rid of the query in here as well. So I get products query, we don't need it anymore. And this file, I commented it out, but we don't need it also. And the import from GraphQL tag, we don't need it import anymore as well. So if you look at this file, the only thing we're importing actually is React and our generated component. And our generated component is using just the same code that I've used before. So I haven't had to do any changings at all. So if you would look at this file, it would just like a JSX file, right? I can probably name this even JSX and it would still run, except for this being TypeScript. So it's a very clever way of getting typings inside your application without having to see all the typings. Because if you're familiar with JSX and you like how it looks, then probably it's fine. But if you look over here, you don't see any typings at all. And that's because how very well this component is typed. So all these things could be deleted. And in the end, we've actually dramatically reduced the size of this component because we just go now to get rid of it. Three lines are commented out. Just like 30 lines. And it used to be way bigger because we had all the typings in here that we saw before. So probably if we would go back to this one and look at the working tree, you can see all the code that I've been able to delete. So my imports are still there, except for React Apollo and GraphQL tag. And all my interfaces or types, they're all deleted. So my typings for the query component, they're gone. My typings for the product that's been returned by the query component, it's also gone. And the same goes for the offer. And then my actual query, it's also gone because it's already been default over here in my documents file. And then if you look over here, not that much has changed, besides that I don't have to type inside my return fields anymore. So when I'm mapping my products, I don't have to type them again because, again, this component is typed very well, so it already knows what this would look like. So this is very convenient. It's going to save you a lot of code because we've now been down to like 33 lines and some lines are commented out. And we started with 63 lines. So we've reduced this component by half in its size. Well, actually, people try and think that adding TypeScript to a project increases the size of your component. So this is actually a very nice way of getting there. And also, I could have been deleting way more code, but I'm just using this products.graphql file to actually create the typings for us. So now you would always know that if I change some field over here in my schema, that I wouldn't be limited in my application because I would change something here, like I've done with deprecating, it's no longer supported. So every time fields get deprecated, so suppose thumbnail name was here, well, someone tells you, maybe you're a backend developer, maybe one of the people you've been working with is going to tell you thumbnail name changed in thumbnail. And then it's fine, you're just going to run a generator again, and voila, you would have your new typings. So it feels very familiar to how code should be working, especially if you're creating something on top of GraphQL. There's already been typings for you. So why go and try and define those typings again? It's probably lead to errors. And if you're not using React, that's fine, or just using plain TypeScript. I showed you how you can use it with plain TypeScript, or maybe not really plain TypeScript, but actually if you would have just typings for your document or your schema, you could have used the code generator setup and just leave out React Apollo. Something else I really like is if you're working with TypeScript, or maybe you have multiple frameworks that you're using in multiple projects, you can still use the same typings from there because you can also import other frameworks. So if you would head over to the code generator homepage, you can actually find that we can use TypeScript and React Apollo. But also, if you be using Vue, you can also use Vue Apollo or Apollo with Angular. And something else, some other package I really like is Urquell. So Urquell is a really low-level application of GraphQL because it's basically just queries and mutations and subscriptions. It's not that much. It's nothing fancy, and it just does the trick for you. And you can automatically create Urquell components as well. So you can see there are fragments created, and there is a component created. So you're not really, if you're using this approach, you're not really tied to React Apollo anymore. You can head over and use Urquell, or just go back to TypeScript operations, or just TypeScript, and get just the fields out of there that you need. So if you're going to be changing from React Apollo to something else in the near future, then you can still use all the old typings that you already created, because you're just going to create just one component, and you can see all your application logic. It's still in there. You don't have to change those things. And that's something else you can do. So this is actually an internal GraphQL API, right? If you're working on a pet project, maybe with GitHub, just try and put the GitHub GraphQL API in here, and you can see you can automatically create typings for it, because the schema should be introspectable. So I guess that's most of what I want to tell you for this demo. I believe it will be possible to ask like questions in the chat. So maybe we can have a look if there's some people been asking questions over there. Hi.
Hey, let me invite people to the chat.
Yeah, sure.
Okay. So there's someone who's asking if they can have a look at the implementation detail of the server.
Yeah, you can. I can actually put the code sandbox link in here. So this is actually my code sandbox. And let me head over to code sandbox and then figure it out. Yeah, so at least like the public URL for this server, it can be found here. I'm not actually sure how to get like the code sandbox. How to do this, and can help me with it later on. This one. Oh yeah, I guess I found. Looking at the code implementations that I've been sharing with you, then probably you can still use custom hooks with this application as well, and like this setup. And something I really like is, like basically I'm using custom hooks for almost everything I'm building. So if you ask me, you should definitely be using custom hooks instead of random props, especially because you can do code splitting a lot better. And with React working on concurrent mode, I believe you actually should be building hooks for basically everything you're using.
Can you hear us?
Yes.
It can be tricky. So what I would try and figure out is before if you actually need subscriptions. So if you're not building a chat, then maybe you can use polling instead, because subscriptions can be tricky quite fast. And also for subscription, I usually like to use something as Azure, because hosting or making subscriptions available without something like Azure or AWS is going to be really hard to do.
So you recommend using a hosted service for this, like Azure or AWS, or?
Yeah, definitely, because subscriptions they're a
WebSockets
bit
is
more
hard.
tricky.
Yeah.
And I don't know about you, but I actually try to avoid having to work with real-time data as much as possible. So.
Yeah, I agree.
But by that you mean that one should use some sort of Redis-based or Rabbit or some kind of this real-time notification services? I didn't really get your suggestion.
Oh yeah, you could definitely if you can build it yourself. That's nice, of course. But I guess most people they don't really know or they don't really want to apply something like Redis or like smaller fast databases next to the applications for real-time stuff. So if you would want to use like real-time subscriptions, then I would probably use something like AWS or Azure to get just a lot of the boilerplate code out of there and just stay away from complexities like that.
Okay.
I see.
Let me see if we have any other question. No, it looks like that's it.
One other question would you be able to tell me what type of architecture should one use to try to build some personalization engine? I'm thinking of how to implement this mix of real-time notifications with some sort of analysis of the interests that one may exhibit by clicking on posts and doing some sort of behavior analysis. I have seen a lot of services that are doing this, but I have never seen anything talking about the architectures that one could use to try to build some sort of analysis of your interests without asking you what are you interested in, just watching your navigation and then trying to select some information that may be of your interest.
That's not really on topic, but you want to answer it anyway, all right?
It's a very extensive questions, but if you really want to know, I've built personalization engines before. So if you want to ask this question again on Twitter, I think that's maybe a better place to try and find out if I can help you with that.
Thank you. Yeah.
Okay, thanks. Thanks, everyone. So it looks like that's it for the question. Is there anything you would like to add, Roy? Like to plug something you are working on or something, or?
No, right now I'm just I'm working. So if you're interested in that, just follow me there.
Okay. Well, make sure to follow Roy and also don't hesitate to click. Okay. So thanks, Roy, and cheers, everyone.
Sure. Thank you. Have a good night.
You too. Bye bye.